I saw something very interesting the other day that kind of got me thinking about the latest threat for concealed carriers to fantasize about. I saw a channel some of you probably have seen called Wrangler Star. I've watched a few of his videos, through the years. Not really something I follow that much, but caught my attention. He had this video about Iranian sleeper cells and, what's my EDC now? And I thought, oh no, here we go. Fortunately, when I actually checked out his video, he was kind of making light of that. He's just walking around his little homestead with his knife and 2 watches, So I guess he was kind of making fun of the concept. But it brings up an interesting point when it comes to concealed carry and what kind of weapon you need to be carrying with you and all of that. You'll see people like Gabe Suarez, who actually worked with Colonel Cooper at Gunsight back in the day, and somebody who has actually been there and done that on multiple occasions, and as a police officer and been in some gunfights himself. He talks about how it's not like the 70s, where the big threat was maybe a couple of losers trying to jack you in the parking lot at the local mall or something, and all you needed was your trusty 1911 with a 7-shot magazine to handle things. And now we're in a different world, different kinds of threats that we have to face. Mass shootings and stuff, active shooters, the possibility with the global war on terror and all of that, of terrorist cells, cartel hitmen and all that kind of stuff. And now, of course, we can add to that Iranian sleeper cells that, based on what I've been able to find from a little bit of a search on YouTube, is something that's mostly being promoted by, predictably more like the right-wing news outlets to try and gin up some fear in people. But it brings up legitimate questions. If you're worried about being able to deal with a situation where you're facing multiple attackers and you don't know what the range is going to be, you're more likely to deal, if it's an attack like that, an active shooter, some kind of a terrorist group, you're more likely to encounter a situation where you're dealing with multiple attackers and also where the ranges are longer, So things like having a lot of ammo capacity and a red dot sight perhaps, or a green dot, something that makes it easier for you to accurately engage targets at longer ranges, can be a very good thing. And, obviously, for the kind of situations that we're generally concerned about as civilians, you're dealing with very close range kind of things. Because for somebody to try and steal something off of you, for somebody to try and drag you out of your car in a carjacking, say you're there minding your own business, some guy's running from the police and his vehicle's been disabled and he comes running up and tries to yank open your door and drag you out of your car. Or you're in a mob situation, some kind of a riot with a bunch of assholes blocking traffic and trying to make themselves feel good by screwing up everybody else's day and making sure everybody notices them. Times when some of these people tend to get a little violent, want to drag people out of their cars and beat on them. People are going to be right up on top of you, close to you. You're not going to be dealing with super long range shots. In some of those situations, of course, you might be dealing with multiple attackers, and it's nice to be able to get off a lot of rounds without having to reload. But still, I think most of us would agree that a typical civilian, the kind of situations we're going to be dealing with, are pretty much the same as what they've always been, In our daily lives, somebody comes up and tries to rob you, wants your wallet, wants to knock you down and take what you've got, comes up and attacks you while you're loading your groceries into the car or something. Generally speaking, maybe there's 1 or 2 of them, maybe 3 at the most, but they have to be up close because they can't get anything off of you or do anything to you unless they're right on top of you where they can touch you and grab that shit. So it could be argued that the requirements are really not that much different from back what Colonel Cooper would have recommended, something chambered for 45 that has pretty good chance of stopping someone from doing what they're trying to do with just, you know, 1 or 2 shots, hopefully, especially with modern ammunition, some of the shit we've got now. I mean, my personal favorite kind of go-to these days is a 230 grain Federal HST, which I need to get restocked on. Found a place where I could find some for a very good price. I need to get stocked back up on that. Right now, the 1911 that I've been carrying, for the most part, I've got some Underwood ammo, 185 grain Nosler hollow points at like 1,200 feet per second. You know, you're talking about probably around 600 foot-pounds of energy, 45 caliber bullet that's going to expand very well and let that person know they've been shot. You probably don't need too many rounds of that, you know, if you're actually hitting your target. You know, a lot of people argue, well, you're going to miss with most of your rounds, so having a lot of ammo helps there, but that's not really a very positive outlook. If you're right on top of somebody, they're right on top of you, hopefully you're not missing. It's like Clint Smith said, not just the point people say, well, they're so close I can't miss, but the idea being that they're so close you'd better not miss, because if you do and you leave them active, it doesn't take somebody very long to hurt you. It doesn't matter what they have, a knife, a club, whatever. And those are the kind of situations that we usually face as civilians, you know? We're not out engaging in offensive acts of violence like maybe you can do in a military unit, perhaps. It's a strictly defensive thing. And once again, though, an argument can be made, well, you don't know what kind of situation you're going to have to deal with, because the bad guys are the ones who determine what the range is going to be, how many people you're going to have to deal with, when it's going to happen, where you're at. You just have to be prepared to try and deal with things. But a lot of people probably aren't going to carry around a pistol with a red dot on it, you know, 18, 20 rounds of ammo in the magazine, a couple more spare 20-round mags in their daily life, because they're just not willing to dress the way you have to hide it, really, and they just don't want to be encumbered by all of that. Those people, even if you've just got like a small concealable pistol with no spare magazines, you're probably going to make it through the vast majority of situations as long as you know how to hit what you're shooting at. There are people out there still walking around with, you know, 5-shot 38s, so it's kind of like the old days, you know, 70s detective shows and stuff. Pull out their little Smith & Wesson J-frame. And yet, those people actually can probably make it through an awful lot of situations, the kind of things that you're more likely to actually face. Sometimes people's gear selections, though, instead of being driven by their own daily lives and what they realistically might face, tend to be driven by just something that's cool to have, nice to be able to say, here, look at this, you know, and some kind of fantasy world about, I'm going to have to deal with this, and some die-hard scenario that's over the top, and just fantasizing about things. And unfortunately now we got the Iranian sleeper cell thing to fantasize about. For me personally, if I'm right up close, somebody's right on top of me, there's nothing that gives me comfort like the 1911 that I have. It just, you know, it fits my hand. I love 1911s, been using them forever. And even if I have to just pull it out and take a shot from the hip without being able to actually use my eyes to aim over the top of the pistol at someone, if it's a really close-in situation, I know I'm going to hit them. I can stick it out and point it at the target, and the bullet's going to go where I want. Unlike some of these pistols where the grips don't really fit your hand right or point right for you. That's kind of the most important thing. And open sights, you know, the sights I've got on my 1911, this big U-notch on the back, and a big yellow Ed Brown Trijicon HD sight on the front. It really grabs your attention. You bring that up between you and what you're trying to hit at close ranges, it's going to be faster probably than an optical sight. Sorry, I've got cat fur. Don't take that the wrong way, well, or the right way. But you know, that's just We have to think about our daily lives and make a realistic assessment of things, instead of walking around fantasizing about dealing with Iranian sleeper cells and all that kind of thing. On the other hand, I've also got a really nice agency arms that I spent a lot of money on, with a Radian ramjet afterburner combo and SRO on it at the moment. Probably like $4,000 worth of shit. And there are plenty of times that I carry that too, you know, a couple nice spare mags with some extensions on them, maybe like 20 rounds. But it's not really something that I think I'm going to need all that ammo. In the most likely scenarios, you're going to have somebody right on top of you, and if it's that dangerous a situation, your odds of being able to make it through that first magazine full of ammo, like 17 rounds or something, and have to reload in the first place, going to be very slim. I know when you see all these police badge cam videos, everybody's out. They blast through a whole 17 round mag out of their Glock, and then they do an empty reload, and they've maybe not even hit the person they're shooting at, you know? So, I mean, that can happen, but the kind of situations we deal with as civilians, totally different than what police officers have to deal with sometimes. And people just need to think about that realistically. It's hard to do, though, because it's fun to fantasize about taking out an Iranian sleeper cell. They're not a very good sleeper cell, though, if they're going to let, you know, some guy with a pistol destroy their plans. But you never know. Bad guys are pretty incompetent sometimes.